Welcome back. It's the Fantasy Football Strategist here, back at you with 5 potential sell-high running back candidates for the 2025 season in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Now, keep in mind, I'm saying that I think these guys are sell-high candidates. It's not that I think that they don't have talent. I'm going to give you the various reasons for each running back that I think is a reason for you to sell high on them. And I think that there's a chance that their market value, especially after the NFL draft and running back spots are solidified, is going to be much lower than it is now. And I think that you could potentially get a lot of value by selling now, and potentially you could even buy low later for these exact same running back prospects, at least a good amount of them. Now, my first potential sell high running back candidate is going to be Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. This isn't because I think that he's a bad running back. I'm going to list for you a couple of reasons. So he's 5'10", 226 pounds. That is a 32.4 BMI. That is well above the 30.0 threshold. And so he's already produced one massive season for us. He was an incredibly talented prospect. And now he's 26 years and 2 months old. So he's not, elderly necessarily for running backs, but he has had a lot of work. So when you take a look at his production in terms of points per game on the bottom left here, as a rookie, his 16.9 were good for 8th overall. Then he had that ridiculous season in 2021 where he had 22.0 points per game, which was first by a large margin. Then he had 13.3, which was 17th. He had some injuries that year. Then the next year, 2 years ago, his 15.6 were good for 12th. He had some injuries and he held out for a contract. And then this past year, he went back up to 17.6, which is good for 7th. Now, I wanted to show you his contract, right? So he's definitely going to be the starter this season. He has $12 million in terms of dead cap. But if you look later, he has less than $3 million of dead cap in 2026. I think there is a legitimate chance that he is cut and they just, draft a new running back so they don't have to pay him an exorbitant price in terms of the contract. So I don't think that the long-term job security is there like it is for some of these running backs. So I think that, he's missed significant time with injury in 2 of the past 3 seasons. He had a little bit of a resurgence, but not nearly to the level that it was in terms of his second year, right? That combined with the chance that he's not going to be in this situation for too much longer, I think is a big risk for JT. And so taking a look at some advanced stats here, looking at his yards created per touch, that is specifically how good he is at creating yardage that was not blocked for him. His 2.74 were good for 53rd this past season. His juke rate of 16.8%, which is his ability to force missed tackles, was 43rd, not very good. His true yards per carry, which is taking away longer gains of 10 or more yards, his 4.3 yards per carry was 24th, not particularly great. And his yards per touch of 4.9 was good for 24th as well. He had a couple of massive games, but generally wasn't producing at an elite level, right? Then we take a look at his career, right? In 2020, he played 15 games. 2021 played 17, but then we have 11, 10, and 14. In each of the past 3 seasons, he has missed time due to injury, but he did have that massive boom at the end of this past season. So I don't think some people are thinking about it like he was injured once again for a 3rd straight year. They just took a look at the ending finish, or wow, in the fantasy playoffs, he was helpful, right? And while that is true, I do think that this is a good time to sell high, given that he's shown us 3 straight years that he hasn't been able to play all 17 games. And so I wanted to show you 3 trades involving Jonathan Taylor. Now, I wanted to show you trades like I've been showing you in all these prior videos and this one, right? I wanted to show you specifically what you could get for only this player potentially, not packages, because it's harder to assess what players are valuing for that specific player in packages, right? So 2 days ago, JT went for the 2025 105. I think there's a very good shot you could get a running back like potentially even Travion Henderson with the 105 with a ton of elite upside that's much younger with a good amount of team investment, right? I would much rather have JT. You could even flip that 105 for another running back if you wanted it, or draft a wide receiver depending on what you're wanting to do, right? 3 days ago, he went for the 108 and Chris Godwin. I would so much rather have Chris Godwin in the 108. You're less likely to get a running back that you desire maybe at the 108, but you could trade that 108 for a running back. And having Chris Godwin on top of that 108, I would much rather have. And then 7 days ago, Najee Harris and the 26 first for JT. I am a massive Najee Harris hater. I'll be honest with you. He went to the Chargers, so I think he's going to produce for us, but I just don't think he's that talented for a running back. But getting somebody that should produce at least 1 year in Najee Harris with a 26 first, even if it doesn't project to be a tremendous class for Jonathan Taylor, I would much rather have personally. You could even potentially flip that 26 first into something else you need if you're looking for win now production. So I think that all three of these trades are realistic. And I saw multiple trades, with multiple assets that equated to roughly the same value. But if you can get this kind of value for JT, I would do so in a hurry. And so my second potential sell high candidate is going to be Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, understand, I'm not saying that I think Bucky Irving is bad. I think he's incredibly talented. I should have been much higher than I was on him as a prospect coming out, but I fell for the size and lack of athleticism thing with him, which he is an outlier. So understand that if you hit on Bucky Irving, he's a massive outlier, but props to you nonetheless. So first of all, he just doesn't have the BMI to be a full-time back generally. He's once again talented though. But when you take a look per KTC, which is not perfect, but it's a general valuation of what consensus thinks of running backs. He's selected right now as the RB7 in terms of the consensus valuation of him. That's below the likes of Travion Henderson, Omari and Hampton, running backs that I think could potentially even get first-round draft capital, who will have a much higher significant team investment in them and are talented runners of the football. I think that I would much rather have those guys than Bucky Irving, so I think he is going to slip down a little bit in total valuation once some of these landing spots are revealed, right? And there will be players that you can get with those picks, with being those running backs that have more of a team investment and have more long-term job security than somebody like Bucky Irving, who just doesn't have that team investment. And so, like I mentioned, taking a look at the running back class, right, it is a particularly great year if you need running back production. Now, Genty, once again, was ranked above Bucky Irving in terms of general KTC value, right? But players like Omari and Hampton, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, and Caleb Johnson are ranked below him. I think that Hampton is a decent shot to get first-round draft capital. I think Henderson could potentially slip at the end there into the first round, but he's almost certainly an early second-round pick, in my opinion. I think Judkins and Caleb Johnson are both second-round picks as well. And, even if they're not necessarily quite as talented as Bucky Irving in terms of the actual agility and vision and creativity as a runner, I think that they should have the team investment to be better long-term valued assets, because it's going to be harder for a team to want to move off of these players. And now, once again, I'm not saying that you should necessarily be just looking to ship Bucky Irving for nothing, because he is a talented player. And there is the chance that he is a long-term valued asset for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But taking a look within the last 7 days of real trades that were made in fantasy leagues, I showed you 4 of them just to show you that, especially with the last 2, that there were multiple trades like this made. So if you can do this, I would smash these trades. So 2 days ago, Bucky Irving went with the 306 for the 104 in 2025. You could get somebody like potentially Omari and Hampton, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, depending on the landing spot for these running backs, and get better significant team draft capital associated with the running back of your choice. And 3 days ago, he also went for the 104. So that's 2 trades within the last 3 days of him going for the 104. I would smash the 104 personally. 7 days ago, Bucky went with the 406 for Ladd McConkey, and then 7 days ago, he also went straight up for Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey, I think, potentially could see some target competition added, but in terms of long-term job security and being in a good situation, he's connected to Justin Herbert as a PPR machine for us in fantasy. I think McConkey is the much better long-term asset and more safe. And so I think that with the second-round draft capital and high-end second-round draft capital involved with McConkey, that he is a much better bet long-term. And these are multiple trades made within the past week that I think are smash accepts for you if you own Bucky Irving. And once again, it's not that he's not talented. It's that these running backs that you'll be able to get, or even Ladd McConkey, have a lot more long-term stability. And so my third potential sell-high candidate is going to be Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. So he's 5'10", 209 pounds. That's a 30.0 BMI. So that is the requisite size to be a full-time running back in terms of the workload. He just doesn't have significant team investment. And if you look at each one of these games on the bottom left here, right, sure, there are some games with high totals of yardage, but he's generally been quite inefficient on the ground. And they had the opportunity, for instance, before the injury to Zach Moss, to just make him the full-time runner of the football and receiver and just not even invest in running back. But they didn't trust him to do so, and so they did sign Zach Moss. Now, once Zach Moss went down, they traded for Khalil Herbert, a minuscule amount of draft capital, didn't really use him at all, and just gave Chase Brown the entire workload, right? But I would argue that a lot of his value came on touchdowns, which aren't predictive, and a lot of scam PPR points per game in terms of just receiving a lot of targets and therefore getting a lot of receptions. I think that there's a significant chance that they draft a running back in this draft class to split the workload with him, because I just don't think that despite his fantasy performance for us, that he's quite as talented as the numbers would suggest. And I'm going to show you some advanced stats to show this. And so taking a look at some of these advanced stats here, his yards created per touch of 3.27 were good for 41st. Remember, that's him and his talent to be able to create yards that are not blocked for him. That is abysmal. Looking at his true yards per carry, which takes away runs of 10 plus yards, his 4.2 are good for 31st. His yards per touch of 4.8 are good for 29th. Not great either. Now, in terms of his receiver, his route participation is a little bit skewed because of Zach Moss being the primary receiving back, or at least at times the primary, and sometimes they would split pretty evenly in terms of the route participation. But nonetheless, 29th in route participation. 6.7 yards per reception was good for 23rd, so not really making the most. Really, it was more so a volume thing than him being insanely efficient with his receptions. His 1.77 yards per route run was good for 16th. That's middle of the road. That's fine, but not particularly great. And then his catch rate of 83.1% was 15th. Once again, fine, but not particularly great. And so I think that he was more so a volume merchant than necessarily being obscenely talented compared to a lot of the other starting running backs. And I really do think that there's a chance that they bring in another running back to be able to split the workload. And we don't see anything close to what we saw because he really was not very efficient this past season. And so I wanted to show you 4 real life trades that were made within the past week. So one day ago, he went for the 106 straight up. I think you could get a more talented, a better long-term valued asset at running back at the 106. Somebody like potentially Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, depending on their landing spot. I would so much rather have the first round pick. You could even take a receiver. I doubt it, but maybe Cam Ward falls. I would just much rather have the first, to be honest with you. 2 days ago, he went for T-Law straight up. Easily give me the quarterback, right? Regardless as to your opinion on Trevor Lawrence, a quarterback locked into a long-term contract with a very likely significant upgrade in terms of Liam Cohen at head coach, locked in with Brian Thomas for a second straight year, over a running back with no significant team investment, easily T-Law, and he goes way higher in startups. 4 days ago, he went for Rome Odunze. I think Rome Odunze was JSN'd this past season. I think with Keenan Allen probably not being retained, that there is a chance, especially with the also presumed upgrade in coaching with Ben Johnson, that Rome Odunze has a massive season for us compared to what he did this past year in fantasy. I would much rather have the top 10 pick who looked good despite not being in the best situation to show his talents this past year over a running back with no significant team investment. And then 5 days ago, he was sold for a 27 first. Sure, the 27 first is a couple years out, but I would just personally much rather have the first. It's looking like it's going to be a tremendous class, right? And you could even trade the 27 first for something if you need it now. But I would take all of these trades much rather than Chase Brown. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a Patreon member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. There we're going to have weekly live streams where we go over, fantasy news, potential buy low candidates, sell high candidates, depending on the news. We're going to give you specific league-oriented roster construction with trade advice based on your specific league settings there. We're going to give you access to early videos. We're going to give you the ability to suggest videos as well. I made a private video for someone on Isaac Rendo, some of the pluses, minuses to his game, things to like, and specific price points to sell or buy for. You're also going to find that we are working on a model with predictive capability for running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers based on a variety of specific metrics, minimums and maximums to be in an acceptable range for us in fantasy that will be predictive and lead us to being able to be more successful, we think, than the average person in determining which prospects based on these thresholds are likely to hit or unlikely to hit. And we're also going to be updating that each and every single year with the new prospects so that we can continuously have the best model possible. So once again, if you'd like to become a member, the link's going to be below in the comment section. Thanks. And so my fourth potential sell high running back candidate is, I think, a pretty commonly known and believed sell high candidate in Tyrone Tracy. So he's 5'11", 209 pounds. That is under the 30.0 threshold to be a bell cow back. not tremendously tiny or anything, but just not the best build, right? So he was selected at the end of the 5th round, essentially 6th round draft capital. He's 25 years and 3 months old, despite only being in his second season. Now, when we take a look at the numbers, he started off the season behind Devin Singletary. I do think that has a decent chance to be the starter this year. We'll see. The Giants have so many needs that I don't think they would invest in running back that high, but they still absolutely could do that. But when we take a look at the efficiency here, he really, for the most part, was not particularly efficient. He did have a couple of solid games in terms of over 100 rushing yards, right? But despite being a converted receiver, really wasn't that great in the passing game necessarily. So I don't think that he's, a bad talent per se, but I don't think that he's such an incredible talent that he has as much of a likelihood as, say, somebody like Buck Irving, who I do think is a good sell high candidate. But I don't think like he, for instance, has as much long-term security likelihood as Buck Irving, because he just was not nearly as efficient, and his advanced stats don't look remotely close to Buck Irving's. But to be fair to him, he was also in an anemic offense, so the situations aren't created equally. And so taking a look at some advanced stats here. Now, I mentioned he was a converted wide receiver. That's a pretty commonly known fact, right? But looking at his yards per reception, is 7.5 or 21st among running backs. Not particularly impressive. His 1.27 yards per out run was 26th. Not that impressive. His 71.7% catch rate was 33rd. Now, quarterback play was abysmal, so that potentially could be affecting some of these numbers here, but still, not that great. His true yards per carry of 4.1 was good for 33rd. He did not have great run blocking, so that is true. But just once again, not inspiring. His 4.9 yards per touch were 23rd, not particularly inspiring. His 20.4 juke rate was 27th, not great either. And then his yards created per touch, which is him achieving yardage that was not blocked for him, of 3.59 was 24th as well. So these stats don't tell us that he's a terrible runner, right? But they just tell us that as a runner and even potentially as a receiver, that he's not exceptional. So that, combined with his lack of significant team investment and being a little bit older, I do think are some red flags for us to be concerned about here. And so taking a look at 4 trades made within the past 7 days in real fantasy leagues. And now, once again, I can't help whether your league will accept trades like these, but I would easily accept every one of these trades. 2 days ago, we had Josh Downs for Tracy straight up. I would much rather have Downs. I think he is an insanely talented receiver. He is slot specific, but he's been able to produce in a crowded room with horrible quarterback play. Give me Josh Downs. There's a chance that A-Rich is gone and Daniel Jones is in the game, which, say what you want, that's an upgrade from what he's seen in terms of the quarterback play. And there's always the chance that Indianapolis drafts another quarterback very soon. So I would much rather have Josh Downs. I don't think there's really much stability with Tyrone Tracy long term. 3 days ago, he went for the 111 straight up in 2025. I would so much rather have the 111. You could potentially get a running back you like that has a good chance to get significant playing time. Another quarterback, one of these tight ends, anything. I would think it is much more valuable than Tracy. 3 days ago, he went for a 27 first. Sure, it's a couple years out. I would much rather have the first. The first projects to be in a very strong class with what we know right now. And then Tracy went with the 405 for the 109. Once again, I would much rather have the 109 than Tyrone Tracy. I think you can get a significantly better fantasy player with long-term value than Tyrone Tracy. And so each and every one of these trades, I think, is a smash accept in the opposite direction of Tyrone Tracy. And my 5th and final potential sell-high running back candidate, and I have noticed that he's a little bit fallen out of favor with some managers in terms of his ADP in startups. And a couple of startups I participated in this summer, he did slip a little bit further than I expected him to. I wasn't particularly looking to go out of my way to acquire him necessarily, but, I think he's been a little bit overvalued. I think he's an incredibly talented runner of the football, one of the most talented actual runners, but I don't think that he's necessarily the best receiver, and his longevity in terms of the ability to stay on the field has not been great. Now, taking a look at his production, as a rookie, his 13.5 fantasy points per game are good for 16th. That's running back 2 production, right? His 13.3 in his second season were good for 20th. That's low-end running back 2 production. And then this past year, his 16.5 fantasy points per game were good for 12th overall. But once again, he's had injuries in each of these 3 seasons. And so, like I said, in 2022, he did miss games with injuries. He only played in 15 of them. In 2023, he missed 2 games due to injuries again, so he only played in 15. And this past season, he only played in 11. So each and every single season, he has missed multiple games with injuries going into year 4. Now, he was a second-round pick, and he was deservedly a second-round pick. He is incredibly talented. But when we take a look at his contract, right, he is on the final year of his contract. There is no first round, or there is no 5th-year option, rather, right? So he could potentially be gone as soon as this next season. So he doesn't have the long-term investment that we would prefer from our running backs. He's had durability concerns, and until this past season, his points per game was just not as good as his value might indicate. And so while there's a chance that he goes to a much better situation, we don't know that yet. And just, the uncertainty combined with the lack of durability is a big reason, in my opinion, why we should look to sell him and capitalize while his value is as high as it is. And I do think that he could potentially be a good buy low candidate, maybe even after this next year, especially if he fails to deliver once again for us in fantasy. And so taking a look at 4 real-life trades made in Dynasty leagues within the past week, one day ago, he went for the 104. That's potentially Henderson, maybe Omari and Hampton, who knows? I would much rather have the 104 than Kenneth Walker, get somebody with more significant team investment, maybe even Tet falls, right? 2 days ago, and that's a 12-team league, by the way, so that could potentially even be a quarterback in Cam Ward if you need a quarterback, right? 2 days ago, Walker went for Derrick Henry in a 26 first. Derrick Henry, who knows, in terms of the longevity, he looked good last year. I think he's a running back 1 candidate once again. Ride him until the wheels fall off. But then you also get that first-round pick. And now while 2026 does project to be a relatively poor class in terms of we just don't know any for sure high-end prospects necessarily, it looks worse than other classes. Now, it will have good players in it. Every draft does. So that's not what I'm saying in terms of it, not ending up being a good class. But nonetheless, I would much rather have a first-round pick in a projected to be weak class in Derrick Henry than Kenneth Walker straight up. Easy smash for me. 3 days ago, he went for Tony Pollard in the 109. Tony Pollard is a good bet to give you production at least 1 more year, but then you also get the 109. You could trade that for another running back. You could take a wide receiver there, tight end potentially. I think the value of Pollard in the 109 is way higher than Kenneth Walker. And then 6 days ago, he went for the 106 straight up. While that isn't quite the 104, I think he can still get a solid running back like maybe, Caleb Johnson or Quinshon Judkins, who should have the draft capital that we would prefer, and just kind of reset the clock at running back, or even potentially get a wide receiver or tight end that you like as well. And so to review, my top 5 potential sell-high running back candidates are JT, Bucky Irving, Chase Brown, Tracy, and Kenneth Walker. Remember with Jonathan Taylor that he has had durability concerns, and each of the past 3 seasons has missed multiple games with the injury. Even that 1 year was a little bit of a holdout, but he did miss time to injury in that season as well. He only has 1 more year of guaranteed money before he could potentially be cut from the team. I think he is a big-time sell-high candidate after a strong finish at the end of the season. People potentially could have forgotten, about the injuries that he had even earlier on this past season. Bucky Irving at number 2. He is incredibly talented. I don't think you should just be looking to sell him for anything you can get. But I think if you can get a mid to high-end first-round pick, that he is a massive sell. You could get somebody with significant team investment. Trust me, there is so much more security with significant team investment for the long term. No matter how talented you think somebody is, players like James Robinson, Damian Pierce, who I will fully admit were not nearly as talented and efficient as Bucky Irving was. Everyone thought, why would I sell these guys? They did not have the team investment. Trust me, you want team investment. But once again, just don't go looking to sell them for peanuts. At number 3, we have Chase Brown. The same thing, except he is just not nearly as talented as Bucky Irving is. He was propped up massively by a ton of volume on the ground and through the air. He was not efficient. He does not have the team investment. And they could have tried to trot him out as the running back 1 before the season, but they tried to invest in Zach Moss. Zach Moss got hurt, and so they just ended up giving him all the touches. I think they are a big-time candidate in terms of a team to invest in running back this season. Tyrone Tracy, he was a converted wide receiver. Now, the team around him, the offense was anemic, so it's not necessarily fair to say that the advanced stats I showed you are completely representative of his talents, but he just was not excessively fantastic in terms of the efficiency. And so I just don't think the situation's, first of all, going to be that much better for him. I don't think he's that great of a running back. And the lack of team investment, he could potentially be replaced easily. And then at 5, we have Kenneth Walker, who in his first 3 seasons has missed multiple games each season with injury. He's on the last year of his contract. He does not have a 5th-year option because he was a second-round pick. And I think that he could potentially lose a lot of value and potentially even be a good buy low candidate, maybe even after this NFL season. So what do you guys think? Do you agree that these guys are sell high candidates? Do you disagree? Let me know below in the comment section. What do you think about the selling points for these guys? I think that every one of these trades I showed you is a smash accept, at least in my opinion. Once again, don't misconstrue this with me saying that all these guys, specifically Buck Irving or Kenneth Walker or even JT, are not talented running backs. I just think that the various ideas that I gave you in this video are reasons to potentially sell these guys, some potential red flags. And no matter how safe you think running backs are, they are much less safe without that significant contract or draft capital associated with them. And yeah, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and I'd really appreciate it. And make sure to check out my Patreon. I'm going to leave a comment pinned below. It would be a great way to support the channel so we can give you guys more fantasy content. Thanks and have a good day.